Hi guys, I've got the 2024 Dappled Appellation Pinot Noir. Now, if you've seen my other video, you know that I absolutely love the Chardonnay. So I've been really keen to try the Pinot Noir, and I want to talk you through it because the winemaker, Shaun, I think there's no surprise why he's built up such a great reputation. And this Pinot Noir has actually sold out a few times for us that we've had to go and get more of it. So I've been incredibly excited to try it. And I had a quick taste before starting this video and I'm quietly impressed, but I want to talk you through why this is an interesting Pinot Noir for me. So personally, I generally like a Pinot Noir with a bit of sort of boldness to it, mainly because if I'm my varietal of choice when it comes to reds is generally a Shiraz. So I like a bit more of a tannin profile on my wine, and so a heavier sort of Pinot usually does it for me. But this is really interesting because it's so fruit forward, but it's got this really nice herby note, and I want to talk you through it. So this wine comes from various different vineyard sites on the upper, across the upper of the Yarra Valley, which basically signals to me that we've got altitude and elevation that's starting to play a cooling influence. And what that means is when we have a cooler climate or a cooling influence, it essentially lengthens the ripening period, which means that acid levels drop more slowly, sugar levels rise more slowly. So we tend to get a leaner flavor profile, not less complex, but leaner. And generally when we're able to lengthen that ripening period, if all the conditions are right, we're able to get a fully ripe flavor profile. And that definitely comes through in this because there's so much fruit. It's very fruity, it's very fruit forward. It's not sweet, but there's so much fruit that you could perceive it on the palate as being a little bit sweeter than it actually is. But it's really enjoyable. And I think the savory edge, the herbiness, just gives it another dimension. But I want to talk you through that in a second. So going back to the longer ripening period, that essentially means that we have that nice sort of ripe flavor profile. Now, the other thing that Shaun, the winemaker, has done is, which is really typical in making Pinot Noir, is using whole bunch fermentation. So there's about 25% of whole bunches. And if you've seen one of my other videos, you know that within whole bunch fermentation, there's sort of three different like subcategories of that. And the first is carbonic maceration. So basically you get all of the whole bunches, you put them in a tank, you pump it full of CO2, and the natural yeast in the vineyard that's on the grapes interacts with the sugar that's obviously inside the grapes and kicks off that fermentation process. But it does it on an intercellular level. So the grape itself is actually fermenting, and once it reaches about 2% ABV, it actually swells up and bursts. And then we get more carbon dioxide release, we get more yeast and sugar in contact, and we keep that fermentation process going. So the second sort of category within that broader category of whole bunch fermentation is semi-carbonic. So we're kind of semi-doing that process in the sense that we're not pumping it full of CO2, we're actually just throwing in the whole bunches of grapes and letting the weight of them crush the ones underneath, which then releases CO2. We've got the sugar, yeast interacting. We then, in the whole bunches at the top, have that same process happening on an intercellular level until they swell up and burst. And then the third is essentially where we're kind of fast tracking that process. So instead of letting the weight crush the ones below, we're basically throwing in crushed fruit with some whole berries, which is generally what happens predominantly, is the approach with making Pinot Noir. So some of those berries, the whole bunches, are going through that intercellular fermentation. What that does is it gives it more vibrancy and lift. But when we're throwing in whole bunches, we're also throwing in the stems. That adds another flavor profile, but if those stems are not ripe, it can make that flavor very unbalanced, very astringent. You can sometimes get some very unpleasant flavors that come through. This one is not that. This one is a beautiful, nice herbaceous note that actually really gives this wine another dimension that I'm really enjoying. So even though it doesn't have that sort of heavy earthiness profile that I generally enjoy in a Pinot Noir, the herbiness of this is really doing it for me, balanced with that really fruitiness. This is a beautiful wine. not just for winter, but I actually think this would be a really nice wine in summer as well because of that fruit forwardness. And some of the other things that the winemaker is doing that helps to sort of round out this wine is we've got aging on skins for about 15 to 20 days. So what that means is when we have a grape like a Pinot, we've got a thinner skin, which means that we have less color, tannin, and flavor that come from those skins, because most of the components come from the skins. When you have a Shiraz or a Cab Sav, the skins are thicker. That's a tongue twister. The skins are thicker, so you have more of that tannin profile that comes through than you would in a Pinot that has a thin skin. And so aging on the skins for 15 to 20 days basically means that we're soaking the juice on the skins and we get to extract more of that color, flavor, and tannin, which helps to kind of give a little bit of structure to the wine. But it's definitely not overpowering that fruit forwardness. And something else that helps with that is we're aging in oak. So we've got about 10% new oak and the rest is old oak. So what that says is that new oak not only adds some additional flavors, but it also adds some tannin. But it's definitely in this scenario only just rounding out the palate and giving it a bit more structure. So it's not overpowering at all. And when I see something aged in oak, it tells me that there's going to be another dimension of that flavor profile, because there's essentially going to be the interaction with oxygen. So oxygen sort of seeps through the oak and interacts with the wine. Basically, essentially what's happening when you're aging a bottle in the cellar. So that also helps to give another dimension in terms of flavor complexity. This one is so subtle though. It's just so fruit forward. It's almost like a Gamay sort of style of wine, but it does have that nice sort of herbiness that's coming through, which I'm really, really enjoying. So, it's also like quite forward on the nose. You've got so much red fruit, raspberry, cranberry, I'd say cherry. A little bit of that earthiness, a little bit of smoke from the oak. I want to say like a hint of vanilla. You're getting everything on the palate that you're getting on the nose. So fruit forward. That nice little herbiness, really crisp, really nice acid line from that longer ripening process where those acid levels drop more slowly. That vibrancy and lift that we're getting for the whole bunch fermentation. It's really, really nice. For someone that personally prefers a heavier tannin structure to a wine, this is really, I think it's the herbs that are really doing it for me. I really like the fruit forwardness. It's got that nice vibrancy and lift. Really fine tannins. You'll probably notice that I wiped my tongue when I was tasting the wine across the gums at the top of my teeth like this. And basically what that does is it helps us actually feel those tannins. And these are really nice fine tannins. This is really fruit forward. Really fruit forward. I think this would be really interesting to see in a couple of years. It's so enjoyable now. And I definitely see that, but I think it'd be so interesting to see what this is like in a couple of years, where more of those tertiary notes from that interaction with oxygen start to come through. I think the earthiness will lift a little bit. Probably some gaminess will come through. But oh, so much fruit. So much fruit. Really nice. Cheers.